Welcome to another episode of the Kwellness Diaries, the interview. I'm Laura McCluckey from WellMi Wellness Solutions. And today I'm going to ask you to give a very, very warm welcome to someone who I have been waiting a long time to sit down and have a chat with. I'm very excited. It's Brian Summers. Hello, sir. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Thank you. And you?
I'm very well. Thank you. Thank you for asking. I'm so glad to be chatting with you.
Yes.
It's been a long time since we came across each other or crossed paths, I guess, in this journey we call life. And
exactly.
Finally,
we've had these little crossing paths over social media and that sort of thing. So it's nice to, talk face to face, so to speak.
Face to face, absolutely. So why don't we get straight into it now? We just had a conversation before I started recording. You're from Canada, but you sound a bit Irish. And I was thinking, I wonder what he's going to sound like. You're very Irish sounding.
It's interesting you said that, because the vast majority of my ancestry is from Ireland. But of course, that's, it's been the 1800s since we've come to Canada. So there's really not much connection to Ireland except for our genetic roots. But in Eastern Canada, I'm from New Brunswick, and it's kind of got this very strong Irish Scottish sort of population, but also a lot of French speakers as well. So might have an interesting accent there.
Well, you're in good company, my friend.
Yes.
So why don't we start from the beginning? Why don't you introduce yourself, your field of study and work, because this is why I was so interested to sit down. This is something that fascinates me, and I do a lot of self-study on this. So who are you? What's your background? What do you study? Tell us everything.
Okay. My name's Brian Summers, and I'm from Canada, but I've been here in South Korea for probably 12 years now. And I originally came to teach English, just kind of to have an experience traveling and that sort of thing. But before I came, I had been a philosophy major. So I had this interest in philosophy and Buddhist philosophy in particular. And I kind of started following up that more when I came here to teach English. And eventually went back to Canada to do a master's degree, but came back yet again in 2013. Taught a little bit more, and now I'm doing my Ph.D. or very, very close to finishing my Ph.D. actually at Dongguk University. So I'm quite pleased about that. It's been quite a long journey. And that degree is in Applied Seon, or Korean Zen philosophy. So basically, in short, Buddhist psychology or mindfulness is a huge part of it. So, yeah.
That's so fascinating. I remember I first kind of came across what you were doing. I thought, I wonder, is it in Korean or English?
Yeah, all of the classes are in Korean, but I'm allowed to do my work in English. So, like for public, I think it might even benefit when you publish to do it in English. So I think they almost prefer that. But
and so, in terms of your Korean speaking, obviously now it must be incredibly good, and your understanding is, especially in that particular field. But when you were getting into it, because I can speak a degree of Korean, but I was so intimidated by the thought of studying that, because I also want to go into my PhD, and I want to do it here in Korea, and it's going to be basically about meditation. So whatever, I'm not sure where I want to go with it yet, but I'm just about to finish my master's and then move on later to my PhD. How about, taking those classes in Korean? How was that for you?
Yeah, it's tough. It's challenging. There's no question about that. You just do the best you can. And my supervisor, she's a nun, a Korean nun, but she's a Buddhist nun. But she's spent quite a bit of time in the States and graduated in the States. So of course, if there's an issue, I can confirm with her, is this what's going on? And it's luckily my native language is English, so I can usually communicate with that if there's a problem.
Okay, well, that's good. It's good to know. Okay, so Buddhist psychology. Now, I first heard about this whole thing from Dr. Robert Wright. I'm not sure familiar. And so I was very interested, and I love his style anyway, but Robert Wright is someone that I was he was my introduction into the Buddhist psychology realm of things. So Buddhist philosophy and modern psychology, but I'm nowhere near an expert. So can you tell us what you're studying, the basic principles of Buddhist philosophy, because you're a philosophy major, but also, just break it down. Buddhist philosophy 101, please.
Yeah, and I've been thinking how is the best way to approach this, because it's quite, there's a lot to say, right?
Yeah.
But I think maybe the best thing to do is just to say, we can discuss a little bit of Buddhist philosophy, the basics, but also that mindfulness is just an introduction, essentially. Mindfulness is a great place to start, but is by no means conclusive. So I think, despite the fact that I'm going to probably sound quite critical of mindfulness, I'm actually a practitioner and a facilitator myself. So I've been trained as a teacher in mindful self-compassion, and continue to have lots of good experience with that program. And I suggest and refer my friends and family to take different programs, MBCT, MBSR, etc. And I have faith in those programs. That said, as a philosopher and someone who's analytical, I think it's important to try and poke holes in the theories and make it stronger. So the criticism that I pose is for the betterment, or for the constructive criticism for those programs. But just to begin, I guess, with a Buddhism 101, that sort of thing. I guess it begins with, and probably why it's so well aligned with mindfulness, it begins with suffering. And there's four noble truths, or four truths of Buddhism, as you may know. And first is, there is suffering, and no one is exempt from that. It doesn't matter if you're wealthy.
That's my favorite noble truth. There is suffering. That's it. There is
suffering.
And
it could just be that simple. There's no amount of money that's going to buy your way out of a suffering, a life free of suffering, and that sort of thing. And the next rules are, the suffering will come and it will leave, and there is a method to extinguish that suffering. And so there's some hope at the end. Yes, there's suffering, but it can be managed, or it can be extinguished, I guess is the word. So what should I say next? The method then, I guess, of extinguishing that suffering is through the Eightfold Path. And the Eightfold Path is basically broken down into three subcategories, which is wisdom, morality, and meditation. And so mindfulness would be lumped together with the meditation subset of the Eightfold Path. Wisdom to a degree, and ethics or morality, not so much. And I think that's one issue that we ought to look at, is why is ethics not being looked at in mindfulness programs?
Well, it needs to be. That's a big thing.
Well, I think it ought to be as well. And because removing the mindfulness element, so mindfulness is one of the 8 paths, and in kind of extracting that from the other 7, it's a good place to start, but there's a lot of information that's not also being transferred or not carrying over. And to sort of borrow mindfulness is to remove it from a context which gives it meaning. And that context is basically not just to help people not just to extinguish your suffering, but to extinguish suffering, period. That means for not just yourself, but for sentient beings in general, which includes yourself, of course.
Yeah.
But it's for all people. So it's not so much I'm going to do this as a goal to make myself feel good. It's more, I'm doing this for an ethical reason.
It's for the greater good, it's for giving your energy out into the universe. It's for putting that out into the ether. Yeah, it's for the betterment of all sentient beings.
Exactly right. Yes, exactly right. So and that is good for you too, right? It's not to say that you have to be selfless, but you can include others as a part of yourself, right? As an interconnected or interdependent origination, as they
Yeah.
would say. So that interdependent origination, it's Yoongi in Korean, and I think that is probably the core of Buddhism, if I had to pick one principle. And it really doesn't get, certainly not explicitly covered in mindfulness, although it's kind of hinted at here and there. So it certainly could be brought out to the forefront a little bit more explicitly. And I think we might try to do that. I think people are trying to do that, especially we see the rise of compassion meditation and loving kindness meditation. And those, I think, are steps towards a more inclusive practice, which goes beyond, like a psychotherapeutic treatment, something like that. So yeah, in a nutshell, I think there are just some elements that haven't come all the way across yet into contemporary mindfulness. What else can I say? It's not to say that it's bad. You're not going to see Buddhists say you shouldn't do that. They're fine with using it as a means to lessen suffering. That's the point. But it could go a couple more steps further, and that's the direction that I'm researching, and to see how we can improve mindfulness to go even further, to do even better than it has already.
Yeah, I think that's really, I love that you just nutshelled Buddhist philosophy. You're like, in a nutshell, all I want to say is, you just nutshelled Buddhist philosophy.
Yeah. There's so much more to it than that. I should point out, I've actually published a paper on this just this month. It's coming out on the 31st. So if you and your subscribers are interested, I can send a link. It's free, and it will give more detail to what I just said. Yeah.
Wonderful. Yeah, absolutely. I would love to read it. We'll stick the link in the description so people can click on it and go and have a read. So it's funny you're talking about, mindfulness is obviously a tool, one of the tools, and at its very basic core, it's just present moment awareness. It's teaching you to accept a situation as it is, and by doing that, that things change, the coming and going, the ebb and flow of the tide, and therefore suffering will rise and fade. So it's pretty basic, but I think you're so right in terms of bringing the interconnectedness of things into it, because for me, I sound like I'm tooting my own horn. For me, because I do read a lot of Buddhist, whether it's teachings, listen to lectures or whatever, for me, that's really important that I maintain for my personal practice, the interconnectedness of everything. So I love the fact that we breathe in as the trees breathe out, and vice versa. I talk to my plants and look, they're nice and healthy in the background.
Exactly. I was admiring those.
Yeah. And so I've got a whole, I can look at a bug on the ground and genuinely feel like I have just as much right and just as little right to exist and be there as this bug. And that's really 100% how I feel. And I don't talk about this much because I am also someone who likes to take the piss a lot. So I would take the piss out of myself, but that's how I genuinely feel. I have just as much right to exist in this beautiful, blip of what we get for life as, the mosquito that is buzzing in my ear, because who's to say it shouldn't be, and what I like to do when I write material that I teach to my instructors, or when I actually teach myself, I really love to bring that in, especially with tea meditation, especially with, nature meditation, body scan meditation. You've got to think about all the people, all the resources, all the patterns in the weather, everything that had to come together, like in this beautiful symbiosis for XYZ phenomena to occur. And so I don't go into it and geek out on it, but I like to bring that in. Let's take a moment to think about the farmers who were in the fields plowing this vegetable so that you could have this salad, and think about how many vegetables are on this plate right now, how many people were involved in that. And I think when you break it down to the human level, you can start to pull in more of those philosophies that you find in the Buddhist teachings, and in fact other teachings from various different kind of either religions or just aspects of philosophy. What do you think about that?
That's a great example that you gave. I really like that, how you can consider the farmers who grow and harvest the vegetables, and the engineers who make the equipment to make that possible, and the drivers who deliver it, and et cetera. It's I mean, practically endless. You can't really even fathom how much effort that's gone into bringing this piece of food to your door. And that said, so as I'm sure you know, a very common practice in mindfulness is the raisin eating practice, right? So you feel it in your hand, and you smell it, and you can admire the way the light reflects on it, and use all five senses in order to practice anchoring yourself into the present moment. So why not include with that, oh, by the way, let's take some time out to give gratitude or thanks for all of the people who have had a hand in bringing this bit of energy to your body. And from that point, that is interdependent origination. That is the heartbeat of Buddhism, as far as I'm concerned. It's the connectedness, and it could very easily be put in there into a mindfulness program. I don't think it's implicit, but I don't think it's I guess it depends on the facilitator and what they want to teach. But I think little things like that could be incorporated to make it an even more powerful program than it is.
Yeah.
And I say that generally because that's, there's multiple programs and lots of different ways of doing it. But
of course, and it can be 100% secular. It's nothing to do with religion.
That's the thing I think is scaring people away, is we don't want it to be a religion. It is secular. It's based in evidence-based research. And if we start talking about ethics, is this going to get religious? And I don't think people want to go there. However, I often notice the word religion replaced with spirituality. And I think that's basically the same thing. What they're doing is removing the institutional sort of elements of religion out and keeping that sort of metaphysical, or that sort of beyond our worldly secular view. It's adding that extra elements without being religious, but I think it's secretly religious. It's just not institutional. So there's a lot to talk about in that regard as well. The one thing I find a little bit frustrating is the ability to flip and flop into different forms of language. So if I want to talk religiously, I can do that. But if I have an appointment, at the board of directors at a hospital, I'm going to flip into science mode, and I'm going to use a different set of words and terms. So there's a little bit of ambiguity there. There's something going on that needs to be fleshed out a little bit more. The dialogue between religion and the secular, scientific world. But there's no reason that they can't have a dialogue. It's just we have to pay attention to what we're doing, or be mindful of mindfulness itself, something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And as well as, because this concept of mindfulness now is, and has been, the father of modern mindfulness, I would say Jon Kabat-Zinn, since the 70s, has been bringing it steadily into the forefront of scientific methods, and obviously the roots-based way back in Buddhist teachings. But I think also with that, you get a lot of, I would say spin-offs, but you get a lot of practitioners out there who are saying mindfulness as a buzzword, or this is going to, help you get rid of depression. But the roots of it are based so far back in this religious philosophy, in this Buddhist philosophy, and then the scientific method is proven to do X, Y, and Z, but it's a method. That's exactly what it is. So when you start slapping labels on it, like mindfulness will help you get rid of your depression, I think we're also getting into dangerous territory. So we need to be very mindful of who is using the terms mindfulness and what does it even mean anymore. It's gone so far kind of into a mainstream pop culture almost.
That's exactly right.
That it's, and I think social media has a big part to play in how we perceive mindfulness. And for me, as a yoga instructor, I hate looking at other people's yoga Instagrams. First of all, I'm like, wow, that's amazing. And then I'm like, I can never do that. And I'm like, wait a minute, that's not yoga, that's contortionism. Yoga is about the practice itself. So what do you think about that? I mean, like you said, being mindful about mindfulness itself. What do you think about, the kind of current culture mindfulness, the rise in the trend of mindfulness?
Yeah, and this is something I love to delve into and think about, but you can get swept up and it can become pretty negative at times, and you can forget. Oh wait, mindfulness. We're on the same team. I forgot. We both want to minimize suffering, but you can certainly go down the rabbit hole. And I try to be mindful of that too. Catch myself before I get too deep, because it can be pretty frustrating. Because, like you say, there's these sort of kitsch or new wavy or new agey, or I don't know what you want to call it, methods of doing mindfulness. And I mean, who's to say exactly what is authentic and what isn't? Because as you said, there's Instagram and these things now, which are important marketing tools that we all use, and there's no reason why we shouldn't use them, right? That's just another form of communication. However, there is some element there, that some sort of feeling of inauthenticity that sometimes seeps through depending on the situation. So, I mean, it's hard to say, and it's hard to say. It's hard to say. There's so many people doing so many different things. So, who's to judge? I don't know.
Who's to judge? But one thing that I do love about it, and you're absolutely right, we can use the SNS marketing tools, etc., but it gives so many more people access to this term of mindfulness. So as much as you will always have certain things that perhaps don't, float your boat, which is completely fine, you're getting this kind of blanket awareness of the term mindfulness, which can only be a good thing, I think.
Sure. I mean, you're getting exposed to some element of it at least, and then it's on you to dig a little bit and find what suits you and what's right for you, and you can decide for yourself. But I think that there is a degree of responsibility that people have to be as beneficial as possible. And what I mean by that is mindfulness as sort of a passive program could be detrimental. There's lots of causes of depression, for instance. And when you're told you must look inside yourself for the answer, that's great advice. But wait a minute, what if there's some sort of a social economic injustice going on there? You need to be active in that case. If you're in an abusive relationship, don't meditate, get out of the relationship. These are the sorts of things that it's important to recognize, as well as, it's the same for psychology and for the diagnosis of certain ailments. Mindfulness is great in addition to these other sorts of treatments, but on its own, it could be problematic. It's not a magic cure, right? So it's a nice addition.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I'm very, very aware of is whenever I'm leading a mindfulness, whenever I'm facilitating, I'm essentially in such a position of, I don't say power is not the right word, huge responsibility, because I'm dealing now with people who are willingly allowing their energy to be vulnerable. They're allowing their subconscious to be suggestible. They're allowing me to dig into their energy field. And as much as, most people have wonderful intentions, if you don't know what you're doing, you could, trigger some sort of repressed, traumatic experience. And in those cases, mindfulness is not going to help. And it's very difficult to, if you've got trauma and then you're being asked to look inside yourself, maybe that's not going to help at all. That might make it worse. So
or perhaps it should be in the presence of a psychoanalyst or a psychiatrist or something like that. And of course, mindfulness facilitators often are psychologists, and in that case, wonderful. But sometimes they're not. Sometimes it's a teacher, or sometimes anyone can be a facilitator if they wanted to develop or devote their time to it. Like myself, when I was doing some group work, I noticed I was getting a few calls about, they're interested in taking the course with me, and And I started to realize, wait a minute, I'm out of my league here. That I'm not a psychologist. I
Mm.
have to be really careful. I have to have interviews with people and make sure I'm not guiding them in the wrong way.
Mm.
I'm not, I think mindfulness is good for the worried well, so to speak. The people who are functional, who are worried, who have, general anxieties and depressions as a human being. But if there's an issue that's out of my field or out of my league, I don't think it's my place to go in there and mess around. You have to refer the person to a trained professional in that particular field. So it's a tricky situation. When you market for the course, you have to also be mindful. Yeah, what am I getting this person into? And hopefully they're open with you enough so that you can do it. But I mean, it's inevitable that it's going to be tough. There's going to be emotions, there's going to be crying, there's going to be hardships. That's not something you can really avoid. Anyhow, yeah.
First noble truth, there will be suffering. There is suffering.
Right.
Suffering is. But that's where your expertise lies, though. Your expertise is in mindfulness-based interventions and applying Buddhist philosophies to mindfulness-based interventions. So what does that mean? What are some mindfulness-based interventions for anyone who perhaps doesn't practice mindfulness, or does, but has never heard of mindfulness-based interventions? So can you explain a little bit about that?
So mindful-based intervention is kind of a blanket term that just means the realm of mindfulness. So it could be MBSR, MBCT, MSC, ACT, DBT, et cetera, et cetera. And so we're just talking about essentially that sort of looking inward, noticing those feelings, those thoughts, anchoring your attention, and kind of the practice of samatha or calm abiding, right? So to manage the rumination and avoidance. And essentially that's the intervention bit, right? You're kind of interjecting the tailspin or the spiral of your ruminating mind, the wandering mind. So it's just kind of a blanket term that covers all of those practices. They have a lot of things in common, right? There's certain elements, like MBCT is a little more focused on the cognitive habits, whereas MBSR might be into back pain a little bit more, or something like this. They each have their own strengths, but the kind of core is that mindful return to the breath or return to the sensation in the body or something, and that's the intervention that we're referring to by MBI or mindful-based intervention.
Interesting. The thing is, you're talking and everything's popping up. I want to ask him about this. So the rabbit hole is real. The rabbit hole is
it's
real.
Incredible. We could have a week here to talk. It would be great, but
wouldn't be enough. It would be enough.
Yeah,
we
wouldn't
need
be enough.
a whole retreat. But I will move things along a little bit. I want to say thank you so much. And if in between there's anything about, what we just discussed that you want to kind of add in there, just take us back. But I'm going to start moving on to some of the other questions that I want to pick your brain about. Now, you just hosted a meditation festival, which...
Yes, or I helped to, yeah.
Yeah, you helped to host a meditation festival, which I was unable to attend, and I was really kicking myself. My schedule didn't allow for it, but I hear from you there is going to be access to the replay of it. So I'm very excited about that. Can you tell us everything about the festival? What was the festival? Who was organizing it? When did it start? Etc., etc.
Well, it was the second Seoul International Meditation Festival, and it's hosted by Dongguk University, the Buddhist university here in Seoul. Is where it was held. I mean, it was done online, but due to the pandemic. But in the future, I think they hope to have it in person, right in Seoul. It was sponsored by the city of Seoul and Dongguk University, of course, as well. And they had this sort of an interactive online website, which you can still go to. It's mind.dongguk.edu. And as soon as you go there, you can just see there are these different rooms, and you can go into the room, and as if you're walking around a real conference hall, you can click on different elements of the festival, which included, let's just see here. The objectives, so the mitigation of global trauma. So COVID, it was a big theme. the cultivation of healthy minds. So just, sort of a meditation practice for developing wellness, particularly as a brain science, particularly from a psychotherapeutic perspective as well, and also the promotion of virtual interactions. So there was, I think, 15 speakers, 8 from Korea and 7 from abroad. And it was quite nice because at least 2 of the speakers from abroad were able to be live with us, just because they had morning slots and the time difference was manageable for them. And then, of course, all the Korean speakers did theirs, and then the other foreign speakers had a recording that they sent for us to view. And yeah, there was, what other elements were there? I mean, there were some pretty big names there. Ron Segal was one of the speakers. He had a great live session, and it was really, really good. The keynote speaker was Barbara Fredrickson from North Carolina. She has a lot of research, much more than I ever realized. That was really great to hear her. There was, Mark Epstein, who I really am a big fan of. And lots of great speakers. I don't want to single out any individuals. They're all great. And then on top of that, we also had some sort of exhibition for young researchers, so myself included. We had some posters available to describe a particular thesis that we're researching, and you could go around and look at all these different up and coming theses. So that was nice. And we're planning already to do a third one. So I'm not sure. It will probably be towards the end of this year. I don't think it's necessarily an annual thing. Anybody and everybody is free to join. And there also is English translations, interpretations. So if you don't speak Korean, you can just click the button and suddenly it's being translated for you. So. Mm-hmm.
That's fantastic. And I look forward to, we'll stick the link to the website and the link to the replay as well down in the description, because I think that's something that people would be really interested in. And it's so exciting for me as someone who's also organizing a big international wellness related event. It's so exciting to be able to share what we've got going on here in Korea, because we have roots in Buddhism, we have wellness modalities and wellness practices and contents integrated just into daily life. And we've got, beautiful nature surrounding us that is perfect for wellness, for cultivating a state of balance and harmony, a state of well-being. So I'm hopefully we're going to see some, when the travel routes open up again, we can see some people coming to Korea for their Buddhism, for their spirituality, for their well-being and meditation and all of the other things that it comprises of.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to getting in-person connection. That connection is very important. It's we can do it online, thankfully, but even nicer if we can be in person. So.
Because the energy is just different. I mean, a couple of my yoga teachers, they really love doing online sessions. They love it. And especially one, she's like, let's do more online. I love doing online. But for me, I really, really dislike it. Conversations online is fine. But there's something that is just so magical about being in a room with someone else and being able to communicate with them without there being any noise. You're not even looking at each other, but you're just, you begin to align with each other. And that sensation is fantastic. And I really miss that. About.
Yeah, it's a resonance, isn't it? There's a certain, I don't know how else to explain it either, but it's a feeling that you get that's not quite the same as through a computer. Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. Speaking of which, you said that you've been, way back at the beginning, you said you'd been here for about 12 years now. You went back, you came back, and you've been here, studying and teaching and growing and developing. But what about in terms of mindfulness in Korea? So from the beginning, I'm not sure if you were interested particularly in mindfulness, so maybe you didn't pick up on anything, but have you noticed any trends that have popped up, or any changes in how mindfulness is viewed here in Korea since you've been here, or just anything about, what you're doing, what's changed in your time here?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, just in terms of just growing in popularity, I think it's becoming more and more common to hear people talk about these sorts of things in different terms. They talk a lot about healing in Korean.
Mm-hmm.
They'll use the English term healing, and I think that's a form of mindfulness, or some sort of present moment awareness, or some sort of practice that could be somehow compared with it. The only one thing I'm a little bit concerned about with is leaning too heavily on mindfulness, because I do feel that there are some people who require more in-depth treatment, and that's not always made available here, particularly in Korea. It's a little bit taboo still. It's taboo back home as well, but at least it's on our healthcare plan and that sort of thing. Like, it's relatively accepted. Here, it's pretty taboo still, and mindfulness is a great place to start, at least, because it seems, less taboo. You know what I mean? It
It's
seems a little more
approachable,
acceptable.
it's socially acceptable because it's
Socially
well-being.
acceptable.
It's
Sure. Yeah, there you go. Sure.
It's
Sure.
not like, it's what 정신 건강. It's not going to the psychiatrist, which is very much like, you don't want to be walking into the psychiatrist here. But if you're going to a yoga lesson that is also about meditation, you can get some of, that relaxation, that energy, that exchange, and the support, especially, that you are looking for, without feeling that you're going to be ousted from the company because you have severe depression. That's one of the reasons that I started doing what I'm doing, and we've grown into an actual company, which I had never anticipated, never thought about, because so many people were needing that release. And every time I would do a volunteer mindfulness group, we had tears flying everywhere.
Yeah, it's good.
And it's so good, because it is allowing people to feel safe and comfortable and supported and not judged. And to be able to offer that space is the reason that I kept doing what I was doing. Because
Absolutely.
It is still very taboo here, and I'm sorry to cut in and steal your thunder. Sorry.
No, not at all. I totally agree with you. Yeah.
And that was it. No, that was just my point. It's so needed, but like you said, we shouldn't rely too much on it, because people need help.
So yeah, it depends on the situation. And so one thing I prefer about the meeting for a yoga group, meeting for a mindfulness session, meeting for some sort of group counseling or something like this, is the fact that it's a group. You're sort of getting outside that fix me attitude, and healing through sharing your experiences and your feelings and your thoughts. And I think that's extremely important. I think one of the key causes of depression is loneliness. And especially in our Western culture, where we're so individualistic and we're so about developing ourselves, I think it's easy for us to take up the, well, I'll just fix myself sort of attitude, and we'll run to the psychiatrist or something like that. And that's fine. That's 100% okay. However, there is something to be said about meeting with people and sharing and feeling as a part of a group. We're tribal people, tribal creatures at our core. So although I'm saying, yes, you need to be careful and psychiatrists are necessary, also there are some things that psychiatrists can't do, which and one example of that is the community feeling. So again, case by case, it's quite complex. You have to really be mindful for yourself in the beginning, and think what you might need, what's good for me, what do I need, and try and approach it that way. But with it being a bit taboo or a bit socially unaccepted here to have mental illness, mindfulness yoga, these different groups are entry points into the world of Jungshin Gongan, and you can start to explore. Then you start where you are. You start whatever is available to you, and then from there you can develop and grow. And if it means going to a psychiatrist, great. If it means going to more mindfulness, great. If it means both, that's probably ideal.
Yeah. And I think, like, just to continue with that, I think one of the really great things about it is we can, through yoga, through mindfulness, like you said, the community aspect is huge, but feeling like, I know a lot of Westerners here are quite happy to come to a meditation group. And if I'm ever holding it, it's not happened because of COVID, but whenever we would do it, we would have a discussion at some point, and it would be like a topic, and we would ask questions, share stories. And the international people, non-Koreans, would be very forthcoming in what they wanted to share. And I thought, okay, the Koreans, when it's an all Korean group, very hesitant to share anything. When it's a all international group, everything comes out. Tears, emotions, hugging, me too, that happened to me. Oh my goodness, it was so tough. So you have that, you know that you're not alone, you have that connection, you found your tribe. But something that I thought would happen would be when the Koreans came and they were with the non-Koreans, it would be a little bit awkward for them. And I was completely wrong. That was the reason people kept coming back, so they could talk about it, because it's a different dynamic. It's a different kind of space. It's a different, using English obviously feels different than using Korean. So maybe there's like something in that as well, which I found very interesting, because I feel like not a different personality, but I feel different when I speak Korean.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I mean, as an English teacher, I'm not sure if you've had experience doing that, but I found teaching English kind of lifts a filter of some sort for the Korean native. And it almost becomes like a counseling session. They start, like, if it's an open conversation class. So I think absolutely you're right that there is some sort of an element there that they're free. They're outside of that, whatever the culture is, whatever it is in the culture that tells them, that it's shameful to have these emotions. There's a freeness or an openness there to share it, maybe when they speak English, or when they're with non-Koreans or something like that. So yeah, that's an interesting element of Kwellness for sure, with the integration with other with non-Koreans. But I think,
and it's a great way to, with the mindfulness and everything, self-love, self-compassion, kindness, understanding, allowing yourself that chance to be authentic. You're not having to wear this big mask. I mean, we all wear the mask. I'm not going to get deep into that, but like, without having to put on the front for society, you're allowed to be vulnerable. You're allowed to feel what you feel and say what you think, and that then changes your mindset so much, and it allows you to think, okay, well, it's okay to be like this, and then perhaps you will go on to search for, like you said, a psychiatrist or whatever help it is that you need. You can feel more comfortable doing so because of your experiences. If you have a nice experience in a strong wellness-based or community setting, I think that's why it's so important.
It's very threatening to be out there and be rejected, to say, like, I feel this way, and then someone says that's not okay, you're not allowed to feel that way. You're going to shut down pretty quick, and you're not going to want to be ostracized, right? We want to be a part of the group, and we're not going to do something that potentially will sever that relationship, because those relationships are so important to us. So having the space to share with people, especially if you have a group such as yours, where you can get all sorts of people from all over the place, and they're not necessarily related to one another, right? So you can go and you can do your thing there, and then you can go home again, and it's you don't mix home life with counseling or yoga or whatever it is that you're doing.
Which is sometimes the only way to survive, is to have a very big disconnect between home life or office life and other life.
Right. It can be pretty tough for the different, like you said, the different masks you have to wear depending on your situation. But anyhow, yeah.
You mentioned the term Kwellness, which I was excited about. So I'd like to ask you, what do you think about Kwellness? What do you think about that term, Kwellness, if anything?
So I actually would like to ask you if you could tell me what it means, really. I assume it means a kind of a Korean version of wellness, or a Korean take on wellness, but I really don't know exactly what that is.
So personally, I have an ever-changing understanding, idea, opinion on K-wellness. And
Okay.
I think K-wellness, just in the very basic form, is Korean style or Korean wellness that has Korean roots, or wellness
Okay.
that has
Okay.
that K style to it. But honestly, for me, K-wellness can refer to things like the traditional side of Buddhism, which is very much associated with wellness and well-being, whether it's the diet or the discipline or the mindsets or the education or whatever that is. It could also be in terms of the food, because Koreans are incredibly industrious with twigs, shall we say. I have never seen more twigs in my food than when I came to Korea. But it's all this medicinal herbs,
Yeah.
like like bracken. I have eaten bracken here. In Scotland, bracken is something that you get stuck in your leg when you're 12 trying to climb trees.
Okay.
So coming and looking at my translator, I was like, bracken. And it's so integrated in terms of like the health food is not health food here. It's just that's what we eat. We've got all those greens, all those things and berries and other things that I have no idea, and they go into making the soups and the broths and all of these kind of things. So that for me is very much K-wellness based. I think that's Korean style well-being food. But again,
Well, I think.
oh, sorry.
No, I was just going to agree that, yeah, food is such a huge part of the culture too, right? There's a lot of wellness that comes from eating well and eating healthily. But anyways, sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm thank you for your input. I was just going to say, and it can even be personally for me, it can be things like just Korean and wellness together. So things that are not intrinsically Korean, but things like, going to the gym bang. That's very Korean. That's very Korean. That's K-wellness. I think it's got to have something that is intrinsically Korean attached to it.
I see.
But that's not to say that, wellness in Korea needs to look always traditional. I think it can also be the fact that our tech industry is phenomenal, and things like wearable technology, and there's a company that I worked with recently, and they have oxygen therapy kike machines. So they have oxygen therapy machines, and so you can put this in your bed at night, and it's like a hood, it's like a little tent thing, and then it gives it, increases the saturation of oxygen in the air by like 80% while you sleep. So how cool is that? And I think that can also fall under the umbrella of K-wellness, but I think K-wellness is just a term that we use for wellness related to Korea, honestly.
Yeah. Okay. Well, the first thing that comes to my mind then is food. Immediately food, and the haniwans, or the traditional medicines, right? I've had some interesting experiences with suction cups and needles and things.
As have I, my friend, as have I, yes.
I don't know what sort of effect it had on me, but it was, sometimes just going to see someone about an ailment is enough. It's whether it's a placebo or if it has some sort of a real chemical effect, I don't think it matters, as long as you're telling your GP or your whoever, this hurts and I need help, and they listen to you and they say, oh, I'm so sorry to hear that, and let's try this and let's try that, and it's very healing just on its own. But there's all kinds of wonderful herbal medications and remedies and sort of not pharmaceutical ways of treating things here as well, that I think it's kind of trendy back home. but it's not to the extent that they have it here. It's much more professional, or more, what's the word? I mean, it's ingrained in the culture, right?
Yeah,
So,
it's institutionalized almost.
right.
It's just the same as going to the doctor. You go to the honey one.
That's right. Yeah,
There's no
exactly.
difference.
That's right.
Mm.
So, yeah, I think, yeah, exactly. So I think that maybe something of K wellness, or Asian wellness maybe, and we have it a bit home too. But food as well, and especially one thing I found interesting is when they ask you how you're doing, how are you, how's it going, how you doing? It was always, have you eaten yet?
Yeah.
And so that in and of itself says something about the food, and whether you've eaten enough, and whether you feel healthy, and whether you're doing well. And the Jimjilbang as well is another great example. I see some aromatherapy and that sort of thing, but yeah, that's maybe a little less Korean. I don't know. Anyway, I'm not sure what I was getting at, but I agree with you that those things are common here. Yeah.
Mm. And I also think, I hate labels, and that's one of the things that kind of changes my opinion on the term K wellness, because sometimes I'm like, why are we just putting a K in front of it? But I think it's useful to sometimes put the K in front, because K, like the K dash culture that we live in now, K-pop, K-food, K-drama, K-movies, K-everything. So being able to hop on the bandwagon, if you will, and as a kind of means to an end, really, as to integrate, K wellness also into this global phenomenon of surfing the Korean wave, and for that to be, and an in to the rest of the world, and say, look, we also have this. And for us, I mean, I'm in Busan, so I know you're up north, but we've got lots and lots of beaches, and which means we've got access to yacht tours. We've got stand-up paddleboarding, which I know you've got over there as well, up in Seoul, and we've got everything related to the ocean. And then 20 minutes away, you're up a mountain.
Right.
And I think that is such a huge part of it as well, because there is no better way to balance yourself than to connect with nature. Wellness is all about harmonizing and balancing. It's the maintaining of your well-being. And well-being doesn't just mean going to a yoga class or doing some mindfulness. It's about your social well-being. It's about, your physical well-being, of course, mental well-being, emotional, spiritual, educational, philosophical, all of these things that make us. We need to find ways to balance that little by little. So, I mean, it's very meta. I know, I apologize. I'm just going.
And as you've mentioned that, though, I think a couple of other things particular to Korea is the temple stay programs for K wellness, temple stay programs, as well as mountain climbing or hiking.
Yeah.
Super common, super popular, and so good for you. It's a chance to be with people, and to reflect, and to get some exercise, and to practice meditation, or whatever it is that you do. So that is certainly another one. People are doing that all the time, going every weekend on the subway. You see people coming down from the mountains to go back home, and it's nice to see people staying active that way. Yeah.
My favorite thing is that everybody in Korea, when you go and do something, you buy all the gear. So you see people walking literally down a straight path with their hiking poles, and I'm like,
Right.
Go for it. Like, I need those hiking poles. People get really into it. But the thing that surprises me a lot is that because it's so ingrained in the Korean culture, it's not seen as wellness. It's not seen as doing something related to your well-being.
Good point.
It's just
something you do.
Something you do. It's just something you do every day. So I think we are such a beautifully untapped resource for all this wellness related content that is just, because it's just everywhere. A Jimjilbang is everywhere, and you go there and it costs 4,000 won to get in.
And you stay as long as you like.
And you can sleep there. Like, they give you pajamas, you've got showers, you've got little vending machines inside, there's a TV on, there's Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
It is just unbelievable that this exists in Korea, but it's not a global trend yet. I'm still fascinated that that's not a global trend yet.
Yeah, the chimchaban culture is amazing, and it certainly would catch on well back home, I think, as well. Yeah, actually, just I was just coming in from a little walk before I talked to you, and I don't know if you can see it, but there's these little community gardens in our neighborhood,
Yeah.
and so they gave me a little bag. We were able to grow a garden in our community, which is really good. You know, you get healthy food, mix with people in the community, and grow something. It's you get your hands in the soil and feel something, and that in itself is a form of wellness, I think. So I'm
Absolutely. Absolutely.
really, I don't know that that's particularly Korean. I know there's these community gardens elsewhere, but they have it here too. So that was one thing that I really appreciative of. Yeah, that we were able to do that.
And it's so, yeah, that's such a cool thing to be able to do, as most of the population these days is living in, well, certainly sit in the cities, are living in apartments, and we don't have the
Yeah.
chance to grow our own food and touch the soil and get dirty. And and there's this big drive at the moment I've seen for sustainability, for ecotourism, and reversing the effects of over tourism, and looking at how we can, what was the term? It's like there's a term where you add to the place. It's not ecotourism, but it's where you go somewhere and then you make the place better by being there.
Okay.
So I can't remember. I'm a terrible student. This is something that
No,
I learned
I'm not sure either. Yeah.
in grad school. So and I love that idea, and being able to, because if the planet, if our environment, our ecosystems, our biodiversity is off balance, then there's no way that we can be well. If the planet is unwell, then we are, then unwell by default.
Right. I mean, we're all breathing, polluted air at times, and we're all, it doesn't matter the rich and poor alike, the young and the old, it doesn't matter. So yeah, absolutely. It's there's what some people are calling ego dharma now, and it's focusing on the earth and how we clearly need to take care of it, and how that is a practice in and of itself for Buddhism. It's not just about looking after all sentient beings. It's about looking after plant life and the quality of air and the water and everything else. So it's interesting it's important to, again, it comes back to interdependent origination. It all comes from the same place. And if it's good for him and her, it's good for me too. So why not do it? It's like reciprocal altruism or something, right? Like what goes around comes around, or whatever you want to say. Every action has an equal reaction, or whatever. But it also applies to our forests and our rivers and our streams and our ponds and et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, we can think about it in a lot of different ways. But yeah, that connection, I think, is quite important.
Yeah, making that connect, especially for children, knowing where their food comes from.
Yeah,
knowing that this was once covered in dirt and was a tiny seed,
right. Or was a living thing, if you're a meat eater.
Was a living thing. Yeah. And you mentioned sentient beings plus plant life and stuff. My plants are sentient beings. They're very offended that you
they're included in that. Yeah, actually, I think you might be right. They originally maybe included as sentient beings, right?
I can hear them now. They're very offended. I should have covered their ears before you said that. Okay, I'm going to wrap it up because we've been already chatting away for an hour.
Yep.
And it seems like 10 minutes.
Goes quickly when you're interested in the topic.
Right? Yeah. What are your plans for the future?
Graduate. For the love of God, graduate. I'm almost finished my dissertation. So once that's complete, as I said, I just finished the publication, or it's been approved. So that was one hurdle, and then the next is the dissertation. So I'll defend that within the year and graduate. Okay, so then after that, what am I going to do? Well, it's certainly going to be related to mindfulness or psychology or Buddhism or philosophy or all of the above. Hopes to teach, facilitate more programs, do some academic work as well, do some editing for, mindfulness journals, and whatever comes along. I'm not sure exactly. It's kind of exciting. We'll see what opportunities arise. But before any of that can happen, I need to get the degree. So
one step at a time. One step
That's
at a
right.
time. Do you have any further comments before we say adieu, goodbye, farewell, auf Wiedersehen?
I don't think so. Just thank you for inviting me, and it's a pleasure. It was a real pleasure to chat. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's been so fun, Brian. Thank you so much for being with us this week. I will put all the information down the bottom. Is there anywhere that we can find you if you want to know more about what you're doing and, your progress and your work, etc.?
Sure. So I'm at Brian Summers, and the spelling is SOMERS 29, and that's basically for everything I do. So in Instagram, from my email at Gmail. And what other ways? Probably email is the best way to contact me. Yeah.
All right.
So Brian Summers 29. Mm-hmm.
Brian Summers 29 at gmail.com.
That's correct. Mm-hmm.
Got it. We'll put that in there as well. Thank you so much. I hope you have a wonderful end to your day. This is Friday, actually. So whatever you're doing this weekend, it's Friday. I know, time flies. Enjoy. And
thank you so much.
We will be in touch very soon. Thank you so much.
Good. Thank you so much. And hope to talk to you again soon.
감사합니다.